Hey everybody, Courtney here with Smitty's Fly Box, and we are just going to be going over April's beginner pattern for 2023, and this is a good old standard bead head woolly bugger, one of the classic staple flies everyone should have in their box. This is a great overall fly to tie. It's a great one to learn if you're just getting into tying, and a fabulous one to fish as well. It's been fished for decades, proven fish catcher, so it's one that you definitely want to have in your box and learn how to tie as well. You can tie this in a lot of different colors. So I'm going to start my thread here. I'm going to leave a long tag out the back, so I'm going to start my thread just here behind the bead, and this is just on a standard size 6 streamer hook with a 4.8 brass bead, and I'm using 6/0 thread. So I got a pretty long tag, one that I'm going to be able to wrap up through the strung hackle here at the end. I'm just going to lay down just a layer of thread as I go back, and I'm going to stop my thread here just even with the barb of the hook. And the first thing we're going to tie in is our tail. So I'm just going to use some black Marabou tail, or black Marabou 4R tail, and I'm going to do that, just tie this in. I'm going to measure this against the hook. So kind of standard on your streamer patterns, and really for a woolly bugger, is you want your tail to be the same length as your hook. So I'm just going to grab that Marabou between my thumb and index finger of my right hand. I'm going to place my the tips of my fingers right against the eye of the hook, and I'm going to measure that there. So that's a little long, so what I can do is just kind of pull that back in just a little bit. Not a huge deal if it's a little longer, if you like them a little longer. I just like to keep this the same length as the hook. So I'm going to get those tips basically even with that bend of the hook, goes right along the shank there. Now I'm just going to bring that measurement back to where my thread's at. I'm going to transfer that hold with my left hand, and I'm going to leave that excess hanging out the front of the hook. And I'll bring a loose gathering wrap around the hook, and as I come down I'll tighten and lay a couple firm wraps right here at the back of that tail. Now I'm not going to cut that. I'm going to build this fly, or build this feather into the body, so that'll help keep a consistent profile to the fly. So I'm going to gather this feather here and just hold it here with my right hand, and I'm just going to do a couple wraps up the hook shank. I'm trying to keep that feather on top so it keeps it consistent. If it turns on, you like to rotate it back up on top. So what this does is when we wrap our chenille, there's not going to be a weird cutoff line or bump where if we cut it back here towards the back of the fly, we would get a little bump there with our chenille and have kind of a dead spot. So I'm just going to wrap forward all the way to the bead, and it also helps eliminate any dead spot behind the bead. And I'll cut that excess, and then I'll just go back over the top of that tail material. Okay, so our tail's in, and next we're going to tie in a little bit of flash here. So we'll throw some flash on this in the tail of this woolly bugger here. And again, I'm going to take 2 strands, and this will be the same length as my tail. So I'm just going to hold that right up against the tail, get the tips lined up with the end of my tail, and again come in here with a pinch wrap where I bring that thread up and around loose. I cinch that down right against the side of the hook shank, and I'm going to walk my thread forward, and as I do, that thread's going to pull that flash up on top of the hook, and that's totally fine. And then I'm just going to fold these 2 strands back over to the far side of the hook, the side facing you on the camera, and then I'll just wrap back over those 2. And then if it's a little longer, you want to make sure that you're going to have enough flash to do that when you do that little trick there, but otherwise you can just tie 2 in on each side. Little time saver there. Okay, so I'll trim that to be even, and then we're ready to tie our chenille in. So I'm just going to use this Halloween variegated chenille. I like this color quite a bit, especially for the springtime. I don't know if it's just the orange or what, but I really like to fish this in the spring. And I'm just going to pull a few of those little fuzzy fibers off, and then I'll do a loose wrap, grab that tag right there against the side of the hook, and then I'll bring my thread forward to the bead. Okay, and then next I'm just going to add just a little bit of super glue here. Whatever your favorite super glue is, go ahead and use it. And I'm just going to add just along the top of the hook here, and I'll spread that in. Let that seep down and on through that Marabou and my thread wraps. What that's going to do is going to help everything hold to the hook, and then it's also going to help the chenille so it doesn't slip on you when a fish hits it. So now I'm going to start wrapping this chenille the same direction I wrap my thread, and I'm going to do one wrap in front of the other. So I'm not trying to go on top, I'm not trying to build bulk, I just want a nice streamlined body, and one wrap right in front of the neck last, and just touching wraps. And I'll get here to my bead, and I'm going to hold straight up with my right hand, hold that chenille straight up, bring my thread up and over and behind there, and secure that down 3 wraps or so there, and then come in close with your scissors and trim out your excess. And again, I'll bind down that little tag in with a few more tight wraps. Okay, so next we're going to tie in our strung hackle. So I just have a hackle feather selected here. I'm going to preen some of these feather fibers back, and we're actually going to strip off a good amount of that. I want to get all the fuzz off. You could just kind of cut it. I like to strip it and then cut here and just have a little bare stem exposed. And I'm going to tie that bare stem in. What that does is it helps me to avoid trapping any of those fibers with my thread wraps here. I'm going to tie this in with the top of the feather facing me, so this is on my side of the hook here. I'm going to do a loose wrap up and around, grab that stem with a few good firm wraps. I have a little bit of that excess right here. I'm going to fold that back over itself and then wrap right over top of it. What that does is just help secure that hackle so it doesn't slip out as you're wrapping it back. Okay, now I'm just going to wrap this back towards my tail. So I'm going to do one full wrap here right in front of the bead, and you can preen this with your fingers to help those stand up and not be all mashed together if they are. So one full turn here, and now I'm just going to wrap back, just even spacing as I wrap back to my thread that I have. I picked a short feather, of course. It's alright, we can get it. Okay, and I'll wrap back here just so I'm here at the top of my tail. And then I'll take that thread tag that I had now. I'm going to hold my hackle tip with my left hand, and I'll bring that thread through and start weaving that through the body of this woolly bugger. And then I just space this out, I wiggle that thread around. That's going to help avoid trapping too many of those hackle barbs. I want to try to eliminate trapping too many of those. And get up here to the bead, brush everything back, and then throw your thread around the hook there a few times. Cut out that excess, and then I'm just going to preen everything back, just pull it all back with my fingers, and then make a few good tight turns here with my thread. Make sure that's all locked in. I'm going to come in here and trim out what excess I have from my hackle feather. And that's your woolly bugger. So there it is. So that's your standard, very classic, good pattern. One of the first flies that I learned how to tie. I know a lot of beginners, this is one of the first patterns they learn. So you can never have enough, and you can never, you know, it's always good to revisit this fly once in a while and get back to the basics and just learning how to have thread control and measurements and proportions right. So go catch some fish, let us know how you do with it, and good luck with it.